friend.
Hi.
Yeah, I want to say I'm really excited to have you on. The little bit that we've met and the bit we've communicated, I feel a connection to similar spirit for life and wanted to bring you onto the podcast. This is not dead yet. And what I like talking to people about is making the most of the life in front of them. And your new book you just put out, Experiential Billionaire. My Southern tongue struggles. Experiential Billionaire is what you've done. So tell me how we got here and who you are.
Sure. So my name is Bridget. I live in Los Angeles. I just came out with a book called Experiential Billionaire. It's about how to live a life rich in experiences and die with no regrets, or at least very few regrets. I don't know if it's possible to die with any, but yeah, we met a couple months ago at
Mhm.
through a group that we're a part of. And I just felt like an instant connection with Matt because we have the same ethos around life and living life to the fullest. Um, and yeah, it's been a long journey here, but we can go into that in a bit.
Sure. And so, I mean, with all that, right, I think everyone loves the idea of it. And fear or other people's opinion or anything keeps people stuck in whatever the cycle of thing they're doing.
Mhm.
What was your moment that said, fuck that? I'm going to do this?
It's funny. A lot of people that, so the book is really like giving people the urgency to live the life of their dreams and do all the experiences that they want without having a near death experience. Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those moments that you're saying is like a lot of people have those moments where, say, like, someone that has cancer, someone gets in a car accident, or, something happens in your own life where you wake up and you're like, I'm going to change my life tomorrow because all of this crazy stuff just happened. So we are actually trying to like give people a book that gives them a near death experience without having that terrible experience.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
So,
great. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, that near death thing, right? Like, myself, and it can be death of chapter, right? Like that, oh
mhm.
shit, I just got to the end of what I thought was supposed to be my thing. And I realized that's not it for us. I think death comes in a lot of forms.
Yeah, for sure. And it can come multiple times, like I've had, as you can like read in the book, I've had many different journeys in my life. And the last, I would say, death, quote unquote, I had was in 2020, which is when I actually started writing this book.
Mm.
So I went through like a huge, like terrible year, as obviously a lot of people did in 2020. But I went through a separation and I moved and I had my new place broken into, and then COVID was happening and my other company was, was really struggling. We had to let go of all of our employees that had worked for us for like a decade. And all of these things were happening, and I fell into a deep depression. And then I had to like look at my life and be like, what am I doing? Like, am I going to like survive? Am I going to do something that like makes me thrive? And like that was the moment where I started writing down all these stories about all these amazing experiences that I had in my life, and like how that, like, it just like helped me get out of this like funk. And it was like kind of like therapy, like writing this book.
Well, sure. Right. Like going through, a really interesting journal prompt I had been given was, what's your happiest memory?
Hmm.
And it's a really complicated one if you really want to dive into it, right? And like search it down. And what you end up in doing that, right, is revisiting a bunch of really great, happy stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a similar, basically, what you put together was this lovely abundance practice for
Mm-hmm.
all the great things in your life that had got you to this point.
Yeah, a
And
really
I
simple
love it.
thing to do. Like, that's so
Yeah,
funny.
it's simple.
It just made me think of like during that time when I was really, really sad, I printed out a bunch of photos of like my happiest moments. Like, I printed out like all of these experiences that I had. Like, it could be something simple as like a dinner party with friends, or it could be something amazing that I've done, like going on safari or, walking the Great Wall or something like that. But I put all of my photos like on this wall. And whenever I started feeling down again, I would like look at those photos and then remember like, oh, I was this happy that time. Like I can get to that again. And it's
Right.
really helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Man, I love the idea of that practice and what that does in people. Um, why do you think people let fear keep them from trying and thinking that this life they read about isn't livable?
I mean, it's really interesting. So as part of the book, we did a study of 20,000 people and we talked to people about their biggest regrets and their biggest fears and most importantly, like why didn't they go after the things that they wanted to do in life? The number one reason was that they just didn't get around to it, which is so sad and crazy and it like broke my
It means
heart.
you didn't make it a priority,
Yeah.
right? Like,
You didn't make the number one things in your life that you wanted to do a priority. But the number two reason was fear. So there's a chapter in the book about overcoming your fears and it's really really sad because a lot of people at the end of their life they'll be like I wish I would have just done this and it's like some really really simple thing that they could have done but I was too scared to do it and now it's too late and that
yeah,
just breaks my heart and we really want to like help people avoid that at the end of their life where they look back and they're like even though I was scared to do it I still did it like that's what I want people to feel when they read this I'm not sure like I think it's just really terrifying for people to try new things and our society isn't very good at awarding people trying new things, you know what I mean, like there's there's like all these bad words for beginners. It's like if you're like
sure.
a beginner surfer, for example, like people
A
call you
kook.
a kook, you know? It's like
I use that term a lot with everything, right? Like,
mhm.
I don't care if it's powerlifting or CrossFit or Highland Games or any of the athletics I've ever competed in, right? Like you have kooks.
Yeah.
And like kook in the Highland game is the guy that's showing up to practice in a kilt, possibly with like Braveheart paint on his face. You're like, ah, got it.
Yeah,
But man, I say fucking embrace being a kook. You're only allowed to be a kook for so long. And if
exactly.
you remove that fear of like, they're going to realize I suck at this, guess what? They know you suck at it. You've never done it.
Yeah, and guess what? It doesn't matter. Literally
It,
no one
no
cares if
one
you
gives a
suck.
shit,
Like a
man.
lot of people said their the number one thing they wanted to learn in their life that they didn't ever do because they were scared was learn a musical instrument, for example. That was the
Oh,
number one. And then the number two was like learn a new sport and learn how to cook and all these things that seem really scary or whatever, but if they would just do it then it wouldn't be scary, right? It's like no one's going to make fun of you if you're bad at guitar. Like no one really cares, but it's like your own thing in your head. You're thinking, I can't do it because people will make fun of me. But
is
that's not
this
really
all
true.
just related to the way children pick on each other and that we think that it's going to continue the rest of our fucking lives?
Probably. And that the fact that when we're kids,
Oh,
we are allowed to, we have permission to try new things because we're kids, right? It's like, okay, if I'm 10 and I'm starting to play drums, like that's kind of a normal, it's okay. But if I'm, 38 and I'm trying to play drums for the first time, people might, think that's weird. But it's only weird because not everyone does it or whatever. And it's not actually weird. It's
no,
just
there
really
is a weird like symbiotic relationship, and I can catch myself doing it too, right? On things that I'm bad at that I haven't had any repetition of doing. I didn't expose myself to learning it. And I think back about anything else I'd learned, and you remember it being a child, like
fun.
learning sports or any of that stuff. And so it's like you almost associate that youth and young with that's the time to learn things, and
Mhm.
that old can't teach a dog old dog new tricks and everything else that people believe is their limitations of why they can't learn it anymore, or that it's too late. I mean, mastery, like pure mastery of a thing from zero to mastery, it can be done in 10 years.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
and
that's
it
at
doesn't
any
have
age.
to be mastery, right? Like I could
Right.
go learn how to like I love for an example, I love surfing and I'm not good at surfing, right? Like but it's still really fun and I don't ever care to be the best surfer in the world, but
Right.
it's just fun and I think people get held up by that they have to master something. And like art, for example, like I love to paint. I'm not great at it, but it's
Yeah.
fun. It's like therapeutic for me. So like I'm not trying to be the next Picasso, but but it's just fun to do.
Yeah. And a lot of that, right? Like I looked at it as I got really fortunate to be very good at a single thing and
Mhm.
then can no longer really do that thing whatsoever anymore.
Mhm.
Um, that was a weird thing that like it's gone. Like I can't do anything but talk about it and ugh. Uh, so kind of like letting myself off the hook, right? Of like, yo, you found your thing that you were best in the world at. So chances are we'll be less good at the next thing. Like somewhere on the scale between less than best in the world and completely terrible at it.
Yeah,
And so like
sometimes you're
what a
just
relief, right?
forced.
Like just let that be the relief of like, why don't we just get better at it? And like I just want all the newbie gains from as many different things as I can possibly do because like having that first ramp up learning curve that you get like in 6 weeks of trying something repeatedly, stop. Like
Yeah.
we got it. It's in the toolbox. I can probably always ride that bike again.
Totally. But then, so you stopping doing that thing led you to like something else that was so amazing, right? Like that's the cool thing. And that
Right.
happened with us too, like with this book. So when, so my previous, my other company is called Listen, and it's a headphone and speaker company. And me and my business partner Joe started it in 2012. So it's been, 11 years at this. But I had that thing that you're talking about. Like I felt really good at it, right? So we have this company that sells electronics, and then we give people hearing for the first time with the proceeds of this company. So for like a decade, we traveled around the world giving kids hearing for the first time. It was the most incredible thing like you could possibly like. It was like
Holy
seeing a
shit.
miracle right in front of your eyes.
Well,
And
giving like one of the five senses, that's fucking crazy.
I mean, it was fucking crazy.
Oh,
And so we've had over 50,000 patients, like physically that we've like touched, that we've helped like hear for the first time. So in 2020, obviously the world shut down and we can't travel around the world and like, literally be touching like 1,000 people's faces a day. That just wasn't possible.
right.
So, so I had to step back just like you did in your situation, be like what else can I do? Like there's got to be another thing that I can be, really good at. And then, all these people started saying like you guys just need to tell your story and you need to inspire other people to, live your dreams and give purpose. And like we've had this incredible purpose for the last 10 years. And now I feel like I'm just so excited to share it with the world. So
Yeah, it's great, right? Like I mean, I know that we both believe in that and that man, there's something about that second act of life
mhm.
where you really get to turn on and decide that you're the fucking hero of that story. And whether or not you believe it or not, like that's your call. But the truth is the choice is yours and you no longer need permission to be the hero. You just got to do heroic ass things and heroic things are taking action. Heroic things are walking toward fear and choosing it.
Mhm.
And I mean, you've got a chance to do it over and over again. So with the headphone company, I'm really curious of that. Like,
Mhm.
what are I mean, is it just a whole range of emotions that people have when they hear the first sound? What is that moment?
It's truly a whole range. Like there's some people that won't even really react because it's so overwhelming. I mean, so there's an extreme example that I even like I hate to think about because it's so sad. But there was one girl in when we were in Kibera in Kenya, which is like the biggest slum in Africa. And she had never left her house before. She was 14. Her parents were terrified. They didn't know what to do. They had like a bunch of other kids that they were taking care of. So they just never had her like leave the house because they just didn't understand how to like have her function
And
in
she's
society.
deaf or
Yeah,
or
she was deaf.
like
But
born complete. Like I guess I
yeah,
don't know
I
the full
mean,
spectrum of how it.
oh no, it's actually really like complicated. It's the number one disability in the world is hearing. So
Mm.
and it doesn't get a lot of attention, which is one of the reasons why we started this company is to bring more light to this issue because it really is so fixable if you have the right tools and the right support. like 9 out of 10 people can just be helped with a hearing aid. So that's obviously the mass majority of millions of people around the world that can
Nine
just
out
be
of
helped with
10.
one thing. Yeah. So that's like where we're playing. We usually, and it really is like 9 out of 10. Like we'll have 10 patients, and we have to be the ones that are the people that tell them like, sorry, we can't do anything. And that's really
You're the 1 out of 10.
yeah, that's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to like this girl, and like she just didn't know how to react because it was so sensory overload, right? There's like all these people around, she's in a new place, she's in, hearing and like for the first time. So it can range from that, from like no emotion, or it can go all the way up to like, there was this girl, the first girl that we ever helped. We were in Peru, and she came from like traveled for like 2 days with her mom and her dad to this like remote location that we are at, and it was her 18th birthday, and she like that was like what she wanted. It was like for her parents to bring her to our event. Um, and it was the first person that we ever saw here for the first time. And so it was like
Oh man.
so emotional for me and my business partner, but also obviously for much more for her and her parents. And like the second that she heard, like everyone was like on the ground crying. Like her parents were crying, me and Joe were crying, this girl Maria was crying, and it was like so, so, so emotional. So it can range from like nothing to that, and like by the end of the day, you're just like so exhausted because you're like
Yeah.
feeling all these emotions all day. But
What an
it was the most
incredible.
amazing experience of my life.
Yeah, I bet it is. I just, trying to imagine how much less information you have without the ability to hear, right? Like
Mhm.
I think it's more than just 20%, if we're talking about the five senses, right? Like I think it's bigger than that.
Oh yeah.
Like, because the amount of information you collect from hearing is how other people communicate. Like you're taken out of so much. And then, especially if we're talking about areas like that, is there a standard sign language that anyone's even getting to learn?
No, so
Right. And so,
that's one of the main questions we get asked all the time is like, "Oh, so you guys know sign language?" I'm like, "No, because every place has a different like what we use is
yeah, it's
ASL,
American Sign
American
Language.
Sign Language.
Yeah.
People don't realize that it's different everywhere. So
Yeah, of
I
course
can't
it
learn
is.
a
Right.
new one everywhere I go, right? I mean, I wish I was that smart, but I'm not.
It's
Um,
crazy.
yeah. So we communicate with them through like like there's a different body language in every place we go. Like India is going to be different than Peru
Hmm.
and whatnot. But like even like nodding is always different no matter where you
Right.
are.
Even the fact that yes and no don't
Yes.
translate globally.
And you're
There's
like
there's
trying to
only a
say, can
handful of
you hear?
things
And
that
they're
like
like,
yeah,
yeah.
there's only a handful of like global translation stuff. Like one is like red is stop, green's go. No
Yeah.
one's done that one backwards.
Yeah, you have to read their smile and their eyes is really important, and like usually like a thumbs up is good, and thumbs
Yeah,
down that's like a global thing, right?
that's global. Yeah.
But even nodding, like it's just different everywhere. It's so interesting.
Oh, that's really, really wild.
Mhm.
Um, Man, I wonder how that affects like that person's dreams going forward, right? Because you now have this new reference library of stuff.
That's interesting. I've never thought of that before.
See, I'm fascinated by people like born deaf, born blind. Like it's one thing
Uh-huh.
I think if you lose it, but
Yeah.
like being born without that sense, especially sight, right? Like color doesn't mean shit to you.
Yeah.
Like I can't
I cannot
explain red,
imagine. Oh my gosh.
you know,
Yeah, and a
and
lot of
so
the people, like a lot of these kids, it might have been at birth or it was something happened, like they got a medication
yeah,
that they weren't supposed to get. And a lot of these times it's very avoidable, which is really so awful. But so yeah, we're trying. We're trying out there.
sure. And so a big part of the book is a collection of these stories and travels. And
Yeah, I
so
mean, that's like we traveled for a decade with this company and saw the craziest things in the world. Like we saw all of these corners of the world that a lot of people don't
I'll
see.
freeze
A
up,
lot of like rural places,
come
right?
back.
So we weren't like Dr. Dre, like we didn't sell Listen for $3 billion. So
Sure, 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 sure.
we actually called the book Experiential Billionaire. It started with like a an inside joke between me and my partner because people always thought that we were super rich, like because we were on all these like lists, right? Like I was on like Forbes 30 under 30, and I swear to God, I had less than $30 in my bank account. Like,
It's
so I was like, this
funny
makes
how
no
people
sense.
think we measure it, or that it gets measured,
Yeah.
right?
So I had all these people reaching out to me like, "Oh, can I like borrow some money?" and blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't have
Really?
any money.
Oh, that's
So, but then we would
fascinating.
respond and we would say, "But we're experiential billionaires," and that
Yeah.
was like the start of the idea. But yeah, I mean, to say the least, we feel extremely rich in all of our experiences, and that means so much more to me than any number in a bank account could ever mean. So,
Yeah, that weird high score that's sitting in there, right? Like, I don't get me wrong, it's valuable. Like,
mhm,
that's a big chunk of what allows you to get to do stuff, right? Like, that's
of course.
what the use of it is. That's not how most people see it. Most people look at it as I'm collecting some high score for some odd reason that we've told
Yeah.
people
So,
what
so
that
I
is
can
that's
die with
supposed to
like
sit in this
a
fucking
big.
account over there forever. Um, yeah, I part of what I believe shapes us, right, is it's not good times. Like it's the hard, challenging stuff. And I mean, through you being an experience junkie, and that's kind of how I describe myself. I'm not really an adrenaline person, but
Mhm.
I like experiences. So how has like leaning into discomfort been part of your journey?
Yeah, so I think, with everything that happened in 2020, that's my biggest example of taking a really negative experience and turning it into a positive. Like when people, so one third of the people that we asked what the most valuable experience of their life was, out of 20,000 people, a third of them said a negative experience. So they would say things like, "Oh, my most valuable experience was when my mom got cancer, or when my best friend died in a car accident, or something like crazy terrible like that."
Yeah.
And they would say, "But I turned my life around because of this, and I'm more present in my everyday, and I'm doing the things that I want to do because that like shocked me out of my system." So for me, that was definitely like my mental health crisis in 2020. That made me really like be intentional about like trying to make the most of every single day. And I was already living this like really crazy life of experiences, but it really, really made me think like, okay, I have to be really good in my head first before I can be good everywhere else, and like be intentional every single day about like how I feel.
Mm.
So for me, that was really important. But I think like discomfort in general is something that like you say all the time that I love is that you want those like moments to stick out. Like you want
Hmm.
um what's
Yeah, I
the
don't want moments that blend.
yeah, moments that blend. I love that so much. The first time I heard you say that, I was like, I'm gonna remember that forever. So
Well,
those are the discomfort moments, right? That's what's
yeah.
important.
And I
Like,
mean, I think that they can be, I think it's really easy to put discomfort as negative, right?
hmm
Whereas discomfort, a lot of times I feel like our language is just really sloppy. Like as far as the vocabulary goes with American language or whatever it is. I don't have a better solution for anyone yet. However, discomfort's this feeling that's unique to all of us. And understanding the difference between discomfort and danger, and that like discomfort is this like overarching title that it's really easy for people to be like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. But if instead like you can be more impeccable with being able to say like, I'm uncomfortable because this makes me feel this,
hmm
instead of letting discomfort be the overwhelming negative thing that you stopped at that door and quit exploring into it.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I guess a very recent example is when you just got back from Burning Man, and of
Yeah.
course I've seen all of the news and whatnot, and everyone's like, "Aren't you glad you didn't go?" I'm like, "No, that sounds awesome
Fuck no, man.
to be in like that
I,
discomfort."
I won, and discomfort's a stretch, right? Like I'm in a
Yeah,
nice van with a refrigerator and a microwave. Like I couldn't drive or walk around for 2 days. Shucks. I got to hang out with my campmates and really connect with some people and spend more time being present. And
Mhm.
that's what I wanted from the experience anyway. What I thought I would get, my expectation of the event was shattered, which good. I'm well aware that that's how it works for me 99% of the time. And so like, I don't I don't put any weight on what my expectation of it looks like.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think that's something that we need to lean into. A lot of people I know in like, no offense to them, but their idea of like a vacation is just to go check into some all inclusive resort and, not have any discomfort. But for me, like that's not going to be memorable. At the end of my life, I'm not going to look back and be like, man, I really enjoyed
I'm bored
being
to
on my
tears.
phone at the pool. That
I'm
was
bored
great.
to tears. I'm bored to tears. And I hate that like the marketing approach that we've gone as a culture toward what relaxation looks like
Yeah.
is being treated like a king, right? That like food is taken care of and I'm served all these things.
Right.
Whereas none of that's refilling your cup.
No,
And
you
most
got
people
to get
don't
out
even know
there.
what does.
Be in the discomfort, like get out there, like experience new things that might scare you. Like that's what life is about.
And not just the scare, right? But it's when you're in those new experiences, you're present.
Hmm.
And that's why those experiences don't blend because you're not on
Yeah,
fucking autopilot. And
because
that,
time slows down when you're
right. And whether
experiencing new
that,
things.
whether that's a long 3 hour conversation with new friends sitting on a couch and, and it gets deep and goes a lot of directions that makes everyone think, or it is uncomfortable situations or, anything else or bad flight delays or any other shit that bonds a group of people through discomfort. I think all of them are really, really important for people to move toward to enrich their lives. And not only that, build that sense of self trust and confidence that it's not going to kill us.
Yeah, for sure.
We're fine.
We're gonna be okay. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. The opening story in the book, this reminds me of that, is about us gorilla trekking in Rwanda, which was an epic experience. But the whole time we were there, we're like hiking up this mountain and it's hailing and raining, and it was like the worst weather possible. And there was just mud everywhere. And
Oh,
we're like getting
no.
pelted with like, huge things of hail. And I was with a few of my friends that like grew up in Southern California. Like they had never seen hail in their life.
Right.
But that experience, if it would have been perfectly like sunny and everything, it would have never been as memorable. Like now I look back and I laugh at those things. I'm like, that was so much fun. Like we were like dodging hail and all of this like uncomfortable things. Like that makes me love it so much more than if it was just a beautiful sunny day and there was no problems.
I'm with you there. I'm with you on all that, right? Like that is the, and you can either let it crush you and
Mhm.
realize you can't change it and be like, all right. And what I love about those days, especially, if we're talking about experiences, right? And I mean, you guys have been to Africa a number of times, and I've recently got to go a handful. One of the things I love most about those experiences is they don't feel like a Disney ride. They
Right.
don't feel like this nerfed experience that you've paid a ticket for, right? And like that's what I think about like a cruise ship. Like I just don't get it.
Yeah, me either.
And like you're just in a moving hotel that goes to the next port that the same people who ran the booths leave the boat to go work at those booths to sell you the same shit. Like, man, it's interesting that people want the idea of adventure, but aren't that interested in real adventures.
Because of fear.
Something, right? Of just uncomfortability of how overwhelming they believe international travel is. And I won't be able to get around and I can't do this. And what if?
I mean, it's fear and it's but the best things in life, I mean, it's like said over and over again. It's like everything that you want is on the other side of fear. So, and I think about that every day. And there's a chapter in the book called called the cave that, or the treasure you seek is in the cave that you've been fearing to enter. I just
Yeah.
screwed that up, but it's something like that. But it is about like, I mean, there's a story about how I was terrified of public speaking, right? And this is like so applicable for you and how we met.
Yep.
But
Sure.
I was so scared of it my whole life. And then, as we started seeing some success with Listen, we were like all over the media and we were getting asked to do speaking events. And I would always have the same response. I would make up some excuse like, oh, I can't because I'm busy or whatever. It's like, it was just because I was scared. And then this one time I got asked to speak with Richard Branson on stage. And I was like, I have to do that. Like, that's
Yeah.
an incredible experience that I will never get asked to do ever again.
Yeah.
So I had to like
Interesting,
overcome this, like,
interesting first rep. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, I
you
did like
maybe
some
should have taken
smaller
some of
things.
the other.
Yeah, I did like some smaller things first, but nothing like big, right? That was
Yeah.
the first big thing that I did. And I was like, okay, I have to like get my shit together and actually actually like do this. And it's funny because I was so terrified. It was like I just basically like blacked out on stage, like, or at least that's what I thought was happening.
Been there.
But yeah, afterward I got to like sit down with him and like have a beer with him, and I told him how terrified I was, and then he actually told me that like his whole life he's been also terrified of public speaking, and I was like, well, if he is like, that's what
I'm
we have
just
to
not
realize is that
sure that
everyone.
anyone comes with that built in. I'm sure there are. They're weirdos across the board, right? Like it's a full spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's helpful to remember that every single person has fears and it's not just you, and that makes it okay. It gives you permission to like, get past these fears.
Well, I think how much even that fear that we translate into being imposter syndrome, right? Like the who am I?
Yeah.
And people that are pursuing their personal greatness and trying to be at the best, right? Like we're always trying to surround ourselves with people to learn more from, which tend to be people further down the path than us.
Mhm.
And so the way that works is, of course, I have imposter syndrome. I'm
Yeah,
always around people kicking more ass than me, which makes me kick more ass. And so, like, being able to reframe the imposter syndrome as, like, that's the illuminating path. Like, that's the way we have to go is walk toward that.
I love that. Embracing imposter syndrome. Yeah, I
What
mean, you never want to be the smartest or the best person in the room, right? Always want to be able to grow. And I think that that is embracing imposter syndrome, which I've never thought about it that way, but I love that.
um so with how do you now decide like experiences, right? Like what for me, the kind of rule of thumb now is if I what I really give a shit about being the only scarce thing in my life is my time.
Hmm.
And I do want to invest in as much of it as I can into things I love that help create my universe and my world. And so the rule that I've come up with is like it's either a fuck yes or it's a no. And so what's your metric for deciding like what are we going to do?
So my metric right now is I really think so much about time, just like you. And I think about if I'm lucky enough to be elderly someday, if I can like, if I make it to that, what are the things that I won't be able to do then? So like this year I did a long trip to India and then I went to Egypt. And for me personally, like if I'm elderly, like I don't think that that's probably something that I will do because it's such
Sure.
a rough trip, but right now I can. So I'm going to do it
India
now.
or Egypt or both?
I think probably both. I don't know.
Okay.
It's pretty uncomfortable, but in a good way. Like I loved it. I learned so much, and those were two of my favorite places I've ever been. So like, but I'm not probably going to be able to do that when I'm old. So I'm doing these things now that I won't be able to do later. And then number two, I think work on big creative projects, right? Like work on stuff that like is legacy stuff. Like the book, for example, it's like it took a couple years. It was really hard. Like writing a
Writing a
book
book's
is
really
extremely
hard.
hard. But now I'm like, I have that. And I will always have that. No one can ever
That's
take
right.
that away from me. And it's something that I like will be proud of forever. And I look at like Listen is the same way. It's like we helped 50,000 people hear for the first time. A lot of people wait until they're, this someday, quote unquote, where they might be, wealthy enough to give back or whatever when they're older. But I don't want to wait to that, and I don't have to, because like we already did this. So
But
start now.
yeah. Yeah. So there's another one, right? That people really struggle to make peace with is the fact that you stopped doing a thing, that did bring you all this, right? Like, and I know as a business owner in any of that, like as things change, right, there is this feeling of like, if the business ever closed, then it was a failure.
Yeah.
And that's not reality.
Yeah, our business is still open, but it's not my full-time thing. So,
Right.
and that's okay, because I've there's so much more to do in the world than just one thing, and I can't wait to do a lot of other things. Like one of my big goals that's a very scary goal that I want to do next year is write a comedy set and do that. And that's
All right. You're
terrifying,
going to do
right?
stand up?
Yeah. I
Oh,
love
shit.
stand up. Like that's my favorite form of entertainment is stand up.
Okay. Right on. That's super exciting. Now, what a weird, nerve wracking thing.
I
Like
know, but
going
it
up to
helps like
be
just telling
funny.
you this, right? Because then
Yeah,
in like
for sure. Right. Like, well, look, part of making anything real is being able to put power and energy to the words that say it. And I don't know anyone who's ever accomplished a really big, scary goal that didn't say it first. And so
right,
we may as well just go ahead and get that step out of the way and start saying it.
it's accountability. People don't put accountability like on their personal goals a lot of the time. Like if I was like, Matt, like I know that you're planning to go to Egypt. Like, did you go? Right? Like I can
Yeah,
like keep asking you that, but a lot of people don't put deadlines on things like that. And they should.
sure. Sure. Yeah. There's for sure some of those trips I'm aware of that, like, so like what big motivation for me going to Burning Man this year and us, Bonnie taking care of getting tickets and doing all that was, I know this is an experience I want to have and enjoy and embrace every weird aspect of it. But I'm scared that there's going to be a point where I'm like 50 and I go, I would have really enjoyed that when I was this age. But like, I know that I missed the window because I'd say like the only adventure I wish I would have been smart enough and realized that I could do and didn't need permission for would have been save some money in high school and like go explore Europe for a couple months with a backpack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just seems too daunting, right? But if I would have had anyone I've ever known done it, I'd been like, oh shit, I can, like, we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, do the hostels and meet women and travel around and get in trouble and all of the things. 40-year-old me would be miserable. I think I would enjoy a European trip, but it's not the same exploration of who you are trip that would have. I wouldn't be who I am today if I did that trip. Like, I don't know what's exactly different, but I damn sure know I am.
Yeah.
However, I missed the window on that experience of it being like a positive thing.
Yeah, and that's why we need to teach kids in schools that things like this are important, and our experiences aren't just, wants, they're actual needs, right? It's like as you get older, like those things are important. And like kids should have that mentality versus like I'm just going to, work my ass off in school and then get a job and then, check mark, like get married, like go to all these check marks. Like those are all great things, but also like those things that make you grow, like that trip you're talking about, like those are super important things.
So when did you decide to make, like, were you on a standard, more regular kind of life path and then decided to dive into this?
So I mean, not really, and maybe a little bit of a way, but so I grew up in Flint, Michigan. My whole family works in the auto industry. I was really the only person that I knew that wanted to do something else. Um, I had always loved music when I was a kid. That was like the love of my life, was like, that's all I did. All I did was like listen to music, read biographies of musicians, like dream about, like I had posters all over my wall, dream about how I wanted to like be in music. My favorite movie was like Almost Famous, and like I read Rolling Stone every day. Like I was hardcore obsessed. So I started doing all of these jobs when I was a kid, like, the jobs that kids can get, like cleaning up trash at venues and like getting
Hmm.
coffee for, people at radio stations, like just doing all these free things that I could like, build up to, because it's not like growing up in LA or New York where you might have a friend that, works in music or movies or
Yeah,
something
you
like
don't.
that.
You live in Florida.
Yeah. There was no one.
Yeah, you don't fucking know anyone who's ever thought about music.
Not even considered it as a career. So for me, I had to do all these things that like led up to, eventually after probably 10 jobs like that, I got an internship at Universal when they still had an office in Detroit, and that was when I was 19. So that really like changed the game. Like after working for like probably 5 years on these like, really pretty bad jobs, but that's
Like
where
fun local morning shows with
yeah.
like Jimmy and the Whale, like some crazy fucking named
Yeah,
goon who's gonna hit a bunch of sound buttons and
exactly.
all
And so
right.
yeah, I had this internship and I was like literally sleeping in my car. But it was like always just my big dream. And like I don't know, I think it's just that music always felt like a safe place for me, and it felt like this dream that I wanted to accomplish, and I was always so so into it. And I did whatever I possibly could. And then once I got the internship, I like, was in the mailroom, and then I was like on, an assistant, and like moved out to LA. And once I got here, I was like, there's no stopping here, because I'm surrounded by so many inspirational people out here that's really like helped me see like a bigger world. And that's what led me to starting, Listen. Like I was at work one day and I saw a video of a woman hearing for the first time. And it just like made me think about how influential music was in my life. And and then I shared it with my friend Joe, and that, kickstarted this massive adventure. It's funny like how little things like that can just create such a ripple effect in like in your life.
Sure. Well, I mean, they all start somewhere like that, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not always a big comet impact that makes the change for us.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to how well we're able to listen to, I mean, if we're looking at stuff like The Alchemist or any of this, right? Like what are the omens in front of us telling us the direction to go? And either we're listening to the abundance the universe is showing us or we're not. The
Hmm.
universe is still talking.
I love that.
Um, man,
Great.
I love that so much. So, I mean, what about the people out there, right? Like, because I know this will be part of it that love this idea, but
Mhm.
financially, how do you afford this? Like, this seems crazy expensive to be able to travel the world, and as someone who does, it can be.
It is. I mean, I'm not here to like BS anyone. I think that, the things that we have done, a lot of them were expensive, and it's not fair to say, everyone should travel the world or have to have these amazing experiences. Like that's not really what the book is about. It's like what is important to you. Like maybe learning the guitar is the most important thing to you, right? That's not expensive. You can go get some used thing, down the street or whatever, like a pawn shop, and like learn from YouTube. That's free. Maybe your experience is becoming a chef, and you build up to like bigger things. But it's funny. So in the survey that we did, we asked people, what do you still wish that you could do? And a lot of the, like, none of the things were super expensive. It wasn't like
Mm.
travel the world. It wasn't, you know, a lot of these things were like, I just want to go to like the next state over. It's like, get in your car. Or
You could
I
be
want
there
to
in
learn
5
how to,
hours. Like you could be back.
right. Yeah. Like there's just
Oh.
these little things that people want to do that they need permission for. They need like, guidance or help. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to money, like we definitely don't shy away from talking about it in the book and how you do need money, but you can also like prioritize, right?
Mhm.
Like if I like to talk about an experience allowance, which is like, say you give yourself like, 5% or 10% of your income or whatever it is, and put it towards like a big experience that you want. So if you say you want to like go to Italy, that's your dream. You're like, first I'm going to, plan it out, say like in a couple years I'm going to go to Italy. But on my way to Italy, I'm going to like learn how to make, pasta and pizza at home. And then I'm going to like start going to like restaurants and learning about like what regions I like the food from. And then I'm going to
Mhm.
like download Duolingo and like learn a few words or whatever. Like make the way to this like big financial experience like filled with like smaller things that you can do that are either cheap or free. And I think that
Sure.
that like gets you more of that like incredible experience at the end of the day because you're like building up to it. So we
Well,
call
it's
it,
the hero's journey, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what you're creating in all these different things. Whereas, this finally pulling the plug and buying the ticket to take the ride and go to Italy, if this is the thing you dream of, like that's the dragon to slay.
Yeah.
And it may take me 4 years of keeping and sharpening my axe and everything else to slay that dragon. Like on my dream board, one of mine is I like road tripping.
Me
I like
too.
overland travel, and I want to drive the Pan American Highway. And it seems so daunting and so terrifying.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, outside of not just acquire a van, like I want to build a van so that I know how to fix it when I'm in another country.
I love that.
So the things along the way are I need to get a van, I need to build one, I need to test it out. I also could be doing Spanish lessons on Duolingo since that covers most of the countries between, once I get into Mexico so I can actually communicate for help or communicate, period, to be able to share conversation with people.
Hmm.
And so there are all these tons of little steps that I get to do to be ready to slay that dragon. Whereas like leaving tomorrow, even if the money and freedom showed up, ugh,
Yeah, that's too much, and those
no, I'm not
experiences on
sure I
your
want it
way.
all. There's going to be enough on the job training anyway,
Yeah.
but
And then at the end of
getting
that,
to launch.
yeah, at the end of that, you're like, oh, now I can speak Spanish. Now I know how to fix a van. Like that's so cool. Like that
Oh
wouldn't have
man,
happened without this big dream.
I one of the even a not an expensive experience, right? Other than time commitment. A few years back, I had got into a little bit of through hiking as just something to do outside of what my regular sports were. And so I'd done a 3 day hike on the Appalachian Trail with some friends. And one of like, I think our third day, like, I think in 3 days we covered 20 miles. And so,
Mhm.
like, the third day that we were on trail, uh, there were people coming down from the north that were finishing, like, so had been on trail for 6.5 months
Oh
doing this thing.
my
And
gosh.
one of the people that we'd crossed paths with was this girl, and she's 18, and this is what she did as soon as summer vacation let out, and she's wrapping things up in the fall. Like, I just thought from like I'm old enough to get the parent perspective of like, Jesus Christ, I can't imagine my 18-year-old's just gonna go walk across the country. Oh, and then the other side of even that fear, right? Like, even as the parent, and like, if my 18-year-old does this, do you know how fucking good she is going forward? Like, do
Yeah.
you know how competent and strong and independent she is going forward? Like,
And like
oh,
more
yeah,
empathetic to other people. Like just there's so much that you gain with seeing that perspective that like if every 18-year-old could do that, that the world would be so much of a better place.
100%. There'd be so much more self reliance and so much
Hmm.
more ability to trust in yourself. And you don't get any of that phonetically. You have to go do shit.
Yeah. Love it.
That's the, I mean, I love that Alex Hormozy uses it to regards, in sales and everything, right? That like, it's not the daily affirmations in the mirror, it's the stack of evidence. And like
Ooh,
those adventures in that book that you're talking about, like that's the stack of evidence that says like I'm a fucking adventurer. I make moves, and like it's the life experiences that drive me, not the things.
I love that. Yeah, and you don't get that without actually doing things.
No, it's really weird that you still at some point have to take action. So what about people that struggle with that, right? That like research, 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 because it's fun to live in that fantasy land, but never pull the trigger on anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think creating urgency is the number one thing. That's how the book begins. It's like knowing that you will die is the biggest thing that like I think about every single day. And I think about, like, I have a memento mori chart here, like, that
Yeah.
I look at every single day. And the average American lifespan is 76 years. So it's 74 for women, and or no, 74 for men and 78 for women. But so I'm 38. I'm exactly halfway through, right? So I look at that every single day, and I'm like, what do I want to do? Because I only have half of my life left. And in
1124 weeks,
yeah,
man.
I mean, you're like the master at this. But I think creating urgency for those people that are always planning and never actually doing is the way to do it. And if you just take one small step, right? You're like, so I want to say you want to write a book, like, and then you tell like 10 of your friends that you're going to do it. Like, they're going to follow up with you at some point and be like, are
Yeah, I
you
hope,
writing
right?
a book? Like, so you
Unless
need
you're
to create
historically full of
accountability.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to create accountability, you need to create urgency, and then at some point you're just going to have to do it. And like, once you take that first second step, then you'll build momentum and get there. And that's where people get stuck, because they just don't take that first step.
Well, I think lots of people get caught in the idea that motivation and momentum, they're waiting for it to find them. And
Hmm.
both are created by taking the action. Like, I
Yep.
know that if I've got writing to do, I should just start writing for the day and realize that I'm going to be 5 drafts into this before it's good anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
So, like,
that's
let's just get the shitty drafts out of the way. Like, that's part of this process.
exactly. Yeah, you have to do the bad stuff first, and if you can get past the bad. Like, our book was awful for a long time, right? But it just takes time, and it takes like massaging words into like great sentences and great stories. It's never going to be good right away. Like, I'm not going to sit down and write like the next like best American novel in like a day. Like, this is not going to happen. Like,
Right.
you if I really took time and I took like effort and intentionality, like, I maybe could do that, right? Just, I don't know. It just takes time.
Sure. And if that's an itch you really want to scratch, also, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah, totally.
I may be a fucking excellent astronaut, but I'm never going to find out. Nor am I obligated to be an astronaut just because I can.
Yeah.
Man, I love it. I can't wait to get a copy of the book and dive in. I know that you and I are going to be spending more time together doing different
Mm.
things with Impact 11 and that group. Um, really honored. Um, any other big takeaways other than where people find the book? How do we get people in touch with you?
Sure, I'd love to talk to anyone. My website is experientialbillionaire.com. My personal site is bridgethilton.com, and I'm on Instagram, mostly on social media. So if you want to talk, hit me up. And
I
I'm
love it.
really excited to spend more time with you and to get your feedback on the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, really excited to read it. I know that I imagine I'm going to read it and be like, yeah, yeah. It'll
Yeah,
be,
you'll like the first
it'll
chapter.
reiterate a lot of things I'm very, very already excited about. So it'll be great.
Yeah, the first chapter is called "You Know How This Ends," so I feel like you're that is like exactly what you talk about.
Gosh, great. Are you planning to do audiobook and everything else?
Yeah, we're definitely going to record that soon. It was a challenging launch we had with like we actually, our publisher shut down the week that we turned in the book, so it was and we had already booked the space for the audiobook and whatnot, so a lot of these things got shifted, but we will have that probably like before the end of the year. So
Excellent.
yeah,
Excellent. If there's any way we could support, help, let us know. I'm excited about it. I love hearing people that decide, man, I don't have to fucking live life by the rules everyone else said you did.
totally.
People
Thank-
that have confidence and back themselves to create the life and world that they really want to exist in.
yeah. Well, I love it. I love that what you're doing. Keep it up. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. And if there's anything else you want to leave people with, let them know.
I I would love for your audience to think about what's one new experience I can have today. can be very simple. Like, I want to make dumplings. I want to I want to go on a hike. I want to go for a swim. Like, what's a new thing that you can do today?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Bridget, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.